Hey everybody, hope all my comrades out there are doing great. We're here to talk about I Choose Cats Over a Harem, Being a Villainess in an Otami Game, Volume 2. So as we left off, Amy was at school with everybody. Her brother was off doing fighting magical monsters with his twin buddies and looking for a supporter to try to replace Yasmin, who is his supporter in like the video game they played before, Isabel. And Joshua, her parents, are trying to get her to not get married or engaged till much later, and Edward is the most patient, handsome boy in all the land. And then Tigger is Tigger, the delightfully fat cat. All right, I think that's... and then Amy is continuing her magical training, and she really wants to be like a veterinarian and just help animals, and also humans if she must. All right, so... we start off with Amy. She's waiting for Letitia, Jalil, and Edward because the show that Rosalind and Alex were going to put on is about to start. If you remember from the previous book, Rosalind she has like some sort of musical class she needs to like pass, and to pass she needs to like put on a performance, but then the person that was going to accompany her had like a family emergency, so then Alex volunteered because he's apparently like an expert pianist, and he is fucking incredible according to the book. And so they spent like the last several weeks practicing together, which is a 2-win for Alex because he gets to get closer to Rosalind, who he ends up having like a crush on. And then also Alex gets out of like this magic course that he hates with a teacher that is very mean. So while she's waiting for all them, we go back behind the stage, and then we see there's like a performance going on, and Rosalind is standing there with Alex waiting for her turn to go. And then she recalls in the back, like these last several weeks when they had their first practice, she goes over to the Duchess's house with all the cats, obviously. And Alex presents her with this like supremely fine violin, like one of the most, like it's like a Stradivarius in their world or whatever, right? Like a brand. It's like this beautiful ornate violin that just plays incredibly. And so then they play like their song, and she starts playing on the violin, and he starts accompanying, and they play like perfectly, and all the maids and everybody is like super fucking impressed. They're like clapping and super happy and stuff. And then at some point she recognizes that Alex has like a little crush on Amy, even though she's with Edward, and she calls him out on it and says like, hey, we're rivals because I also love Amy and I want to be close to her. And then he's like, yeah, whatever. So then we come back forward to like the performance, and they fucking crush it. Everyone meets up at the salon afterwards to like talk about it and to congratulate them and stuff, and everyone's super impressed with Rosalind and Alex, of course. The girls then head out to a tea party by themselves to end that first chapter. And then we get intermission. And this intermission is the first time that Letitia visits Amy's house. She brings her cat to play with like Tigger. And then her parents are very... I wrote weirs. I don't know what the fuck I'm trying to write. They're very like, I don't know. There's something that Letitia comes to visit, and then the girls just go play with Tigger and the other cat, and then they just hang out with them and have a good time. So chapter 2 starts up. The tea party that the girls are having is great. Afterwards, the girls leave, and it's at Amy's house. Once Letitia and Rosalind leave, Amy's just talking to her mother. They got a letter from Harold. He sends these messages every once in a while, but because he was so used to like text messaging and sending short emails in like the Japanese world, even after like 20 years of life here, he hasn't gotten used to how to live here, which is the most ridiculous thing about these books, honestly. It's not the isekai-ness, it's that these people have been living here for like 20 to 40 years and they still act like they're in Japan. It's like you haven't like adapted at all. Like people have dramatic changes in like their attitudes, behaviors after like a couple of years. Like you'll meet somebody and not see them for a few years and see them again, and they have like a totally different personality sometimes. So it's just kind of funny. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's like a fantasy escapism book. But just thought that it's one of those things that I keep thinking about because I'm that kind of asshole. So the letter is sent. They talk about how it's like he just sends like text messages, essentially. He'll send like 2 or 3 sentences and just be like, here you go. And then they talk a little bit more. Amy like reiterizes, because it's a new book, that she's very concerned that she's the villainess in an Otami game. Her mother's like, don't worry about it, just live your life and have a great time. And then if stuff comes up, YOLO, you'll figure it out then. And it's like, absolutely, that's the best advice you can give anybody in life. Generally, it's like, yeah, you got shit coming up, but like, what are you doing now? Like, just go enjoy life. And like, when the bad shit happens, like, you'll deal with it then. Like, why worry about stuff so that you can worry about it more when it actually happens? That's like some crazy nonsense. Anyway, they also, in this most recent letter, though, there's a map. And so Harold's got a bunch of dates and other shit on there, and it's like his journal. He just like has a map of all the adventures he's going on, where he was and what's going on and whatnot. And they're like, what the fuck is this? And so they're trying to see if there's like a secret message in there or whatever. So they start like looking at it, trying to figure it out. And then finally they see a name that Amy recognizes, and it's the Yasmin. It's the girl from the real world. And it's like, the fuck? They found Yasmin? Like, what is that supposed to mean? And then he gets in the letter, it talks about them going on some sort of safari, and that they're coming back for like, there's a big tournament in the capital or whatever. So they're going to come back for that. At some point I thought they called it like a sports day. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but I must have just heard it wrong. And they all get excited about him coming, which wraps up chapter 2. So in the intermission, we see Riddle. He comes to visit Amy, and then he cuddles with Tigger. And then Edward comes to get Riddle, but he sees that he's hanging out with Tigger and just leaves him be. Then the second intermission, Amy's dad finally makes a camera, and they have a good time taking pictures and whatnot. And then there's a third intermission. Yep. Where there's just Amy making cookies. Good times. So chapter 3 begins, and Edward is practicing sword fighting with his grandfather because he's going to put a team together with Alex and this other knight who's like the knight from the Otome game. We find out later. So that he can be for the tournament. And so he's his grandfather, Edward's grandfather, who was always close to him, even though he's the third son of like the first son or whatever. They're having a good time. At some point, Alex and the knight come and talk to him. They talk about how Edward fights very defensively because that's how he was trained, because he's not supposed to be a conqueror. He's supposed to like defend himself and not die, essentially, because he's the third son, and there's a whole thing about that. They also talk about him working with Amy's dad, how that's going. And then someone mentions that for Joshua to have won the right to marry Isabel, he had to fight the grandfather, who was like a world-renowned warrior, right, and like a pirate king, and which is very impressive because it's like Joshua's not like much of a fighter. And then they talk about how he used some sort of style that like no one had ever seen before, and it was like very impressive. And then we learn that because the book tells us that he used kendo, right? He's always in like the kendo club in high school, and I guess he kept it up, because then when he died and was resurrected here, he just kept fighting that way. And so because it wasn't like a known style, that the Pirate King was not able to like defend against it very well, and he was able to win the fight in the duel. And then one of them kind of like offhandedly mentions that like it didn't seem like the Pirate King really put his whole heart into it, right? Because the reason Joshua had to fight for the hand is because he was from like a lower level of like the nobility, and so he had to like earn the right through combat, right? But the dad seemed to like him, so it didn't matter as much. Anyway, we don't get too much of that. So anyway, everyone's super impressed with Joshua, and then we head over to like Amy's house with her point of view, and her mother, Isabel, sees her like looking off in the distance, and that she has a letter from Edward in her hand, and her mother's like, "Hey, you okay?" And she's like, "I think you like Edward more than you're like leaning on." And Amy's like, "No." And then her mother like giggles about it, and then she's like, I got an appointment." And then Amy starts thinking about it some more. She's like, well, I never had a boyfriend in Japan, so I really don't know if I like this guy or not, because I don't have any frame of reference for what romance is to be like. Like, I am like a 14-year-old girl, but I'm like literally like a 14-year-old girl, because if I had like a romance or a love interest or something in Japan before I was like isekai'd over here through whatever like terrible tragedy killed my whole family, then like I would have a better frame of reference for like what love is and what is not, but I don't know. And so she's like, well, maybe I do love him. I don't know. She's still concerned about meeting the heroine and the whole Otome game and her being a villain and whatnot, which wraps up chapter 3. Chapter 4, we go that despite Edward being off on inspecting like villages and stuff, he was supposed to. So Edward was supposed to hang out with Amy and go for a ride on like the riding grounds, but that he had to go off, and he got called last minute to like, he was on like a tour doing stuff as like his royal duties, and then he got pulled into like some inspection that was like an extra, so he's not able to make it back. But despite all this, Amy's gonna go and like ride the horses and whatnot, because there's like a mean horse or something they wanted her to check out. Or a new foal, I think that's how you say it. So she heads out over there. The foal is in like a super bad mood, and then Amy like fixes that up immediately, because that's what she does. And then someone else is thinking about how she's like a protectorate or a guardian or something, which again is like one of these once in a lifetime people with intense magical properties and whatnot, and that sets them apart from like all others. And then this is the thing like Edward was thinking about, and this thing like her grandfather's thinking about, and all this stuff. And so after Amy takes care of the foal and like cures whatever ailment he had, she starts just like riding horses and everything, and then when she's about to leave, she sees a dark figure in the distance, and it's Edward, and she's like, oh shit, I might actually like this guy. And so with Edward back, he decides to escort Amy home via the carriage. They chat about his trip, they chat about the fowl. Edward reveals that he was being tested, that this kind of spur of the moment trip was that the leaders of the country, like the Congress or whatever, set up this thing to see if he would be corrupted to do like a succession crisis, and if so, they might need to like take care of that business, right? But he's like, I would never go against my brother, and he's the crown prince. I don't really give a fuck about ruling this country. Like, that's all him. He can do whatever he wants. And so he's like, I did not engage with that at all. So they discuss the oligarchy a little bit, and again, we get like a reiteration that the nobles have a little bit of sway with the king because it's not an absolute monarch or anything. And they start talking about setting up for like the fighting tournament and how the setting up's going well and how Amy's going to be involved because she's like the best healer in the kingdom, and because they're going to have like actual fights, like not to the death, but people can get like pretty injured, so they want healers there to like help them out and whatnot. And then we get like a reiteration of the story of like Edward doing the inspections and then riding back as fast as he can to be with Amy and whatnot, from his point of view. And then we find out that like at this party there was like a whole bunch of bitches trying to seduce him, and they were talking shit on Amy and stuff, and he was like, bad move, motherfuckers. Later on, after Amy gets home, she thinks about the trip. She thinks about Edward, and she's like super embarrassed and whatnot because they were acting like lovers. She was like holding his hand, or no, she was like resting her hand on his face, I think. Yeah, that's what it was. And she's like, oh, we're so intimate. I don't know what to do. Something. It's very cute. Anyway, so she hugs Tigger and worries about it a whole bunch. And, thinks about it and is all concerned and shit. Anyway, so the tournament arrives. Not important. And she's super busy with all her magical duties and stuff. So she feels like she needs to go visit Edward and also Harold to like wish them well, because it's like a superstition, right? You got to go talk to like your lover essentially, or like your friends. And so she goes to see Edward first, and they're talking, and then they get really close and they almost kiss. And then she gets embarrassed and runs off. And she goes to check on Harold, but he's like gone. But he finds out that this woman he found to replace to be his supporter. Let's see, but he found the woman. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so they talk more about that and how great she is and how he just found her like somewhere, and then like he worked real hard to get her to join her team because she was kind of reticent to do so. Anyway, and that he calls her Yasmin, just like the video game character. And then she also she runs into like the knight character from the Otama game and the wizard character from the Otama game. The knight character is on Edward's team, as I mentioned before. She's like, he seems really nice. And then the wizard is like an apprentice of like the head wizard, the one who like runs the magical class that like gave the bubble to Harold and all that stuff before. And he's like married with a kid, and he's like madly in love with his wife and loves his kid. And so she feels better about the whole Otama game thing, because it seems like these people are just like not related at all to like this game kind of like exists, but not like exists in the same way. Like she's not like reliving it, like with the death flags, like I'm the Villainous and the Death Flag anime I watched and reviewed like last year maybe. Anyway, and so Amy sits with him, or works with him and the head wizard to like heal everybody and make sure everything's going well for the tournament. While Amy's getting ready for the tournament with like all the rest of the wizards and healers and stuff, she's like meandering about somewhat. And then the king and queen arrive. Oh, good. So then everyone's going to stand in the halls and like bow and whatnot. And then as they're walking by, Amy's just like thinking about some other random shit like cats or something. And then the queen stops right in front of her. And she's like, hello, you're Amy, aren't you? And it's like Amy Nordstrom or whatever their last name is. Anyway, she's like, yes, your highness, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, very good, here, take this. And she gives Amy a ring. And then Amy's like, thank you, your majesty. And then they like proceed on with their way. Later on, she asks the wizard friend about it, the apprentice guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah," and he like looks at the insignia and he's like, "Oh, that's like the blessing of like the kingdom for being like a great wizard or a great warrior or something." And so he pulls up like his sleeve, his like wizard's robe, I guess, and he has a bracelet with the same insignia, and it's like it lets you get inside like a bunch of cool places, like all the hidden places that you're not supposed to go otherwise, like the royal bookshelves, which is like the premier library with a bunch of like magic and shit in there, and then the royal greenhouse as well, and all this stuff. And then he's like, it's pretty impressive they gave it to you. It's like, and they usually give that to recognize people who are like stupendous healers, because again, healing magic is like the bestest and also the hardest and whatnot. And so sometimes they only give one of those away like every couple of years or whatever. And most of the time people have to petition to get it. So Amy's like super flustered because she got this thing. And then at that point, Dion, the magic leader, is like, chop, 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 because the tournament begins. So Amy's like healing a bunch of people. She's like chit-chatting with some of the randos who are talking. And then at some point, Jalil comes in, and he's like all busted up. And he's like, they're taking him to like somebody else. And he's like, no, stop me here. And Jalil is like the king. Like he's like the crown prince of Bakar or whatever. And so, he's like the king. He's the crown prince of like a foreign nation. So everyone's like, oh yes, absolutely, we're gonna stop here. And Amy's like, you can't just stop over here, Jalil. I'm like healing people and stuff. He's like, no, you will heal me. And she's like, oh my gosh, fine. And so she heals him like super well, to a point where he's like feels energized and there's like no scarring and like nothing at all. And then he's like, all right, you're coming with me. And then the Dion is like, just gives like his nod of approval. And so Jalil drags her to like the watch room because she's not been able to watch like any matches because she's been down here like healing the whole time. And she promised Edward that she'd come watch one of his matches. And so they get there. Tigger's there. Isabel and Joshua, her parents, are there. And they're all excited because Edward's about to go up and fight. And so he does. And then right before the battle starts, Jalil asks her to come back to be his royal healer in like Bakar. Dun dun dun. And that's into chapter 7. So chapter 8, we get this like badass fight between Harold and his crew and Edward and his crew, because apparently that was the fight they're going to watch. Was like, it's like the semifinals, so not the finals. The finals are right before that. And it's pretty good for like a rom-com book. Like it's like well described. It's not too intense. Not too like, it's like an R.A. Salvatore a book, right, with like all the detailed combat and aerobatics and stuff like that. But it's pretty good for like what this fucking book is, to be honest. Anyway, Edward's team loses, and then we find out that the supporter for Harold got the Yasmin girl he replaced, or he got as a supporter that we learned about earlier. It's the pink-haired girl from like her grandpa's era that was like on the boat that got caught by like a jellyfish and almost destroyed by the Kraken. And then Amy's like, shit, that's the heroine. So she gets a little bit concerned. And then Edward and company, they come and visit Amy and everybody else in the viewing room, and they're all chit-chatting and talking very friendly. And we find out that the night guy is like super popular with his men, and he's a great dude. And then Alex and Rosalind, like they head out to like have their own chat. And then at some point, Amy is just standing there with Edward, and then she starts crying and holding him, and then she confesses her love, and then Edward confesses his love. Meanwhile, Alex is being a creep and watching this whole thing from somewhere else, and that's going on with like Edward and Amy. And this is like, we go back like a little bit in time, so they're just like chit-chatting really close, and he's like, And then Rosalind is standing there with him, and they start chit-chatting, and they start flirting, and then he's like flirting like real hard, and she's kind of distracted. And then he proposes to her that he's like, hey, well, I want you to marry me, and gets on his knees in the whole shebang. And she's like, what the fuck? And it's like, girl, did you not see this coming? You're a dumb bitch. But anyway, and then she like is thinking about it, and she has like, they had a whole conversation about proposals and how she's like interviewing with like these old men because they like, no one really wants to be like, there's no advantage to like her kingdom per se, and then they don't need like any like shenanigans with her, like, because she has an older brother who's gonna like take over the dukedom or whatever she belongs to, and so they don't need like a younger guy who's gonna try to like use her to like, you know, it's like the fucking secession crisis. It's all very like surface level secession crisis in these books, but that's like the concern. And so she's just like, eh. And then like there's no like actual noble who's gonna like want to marry her who has his like own thing, because, you know, why would they? She's just like from like a provincial noble family. But that too bad, bitch. Alex is down, and he's a duke. He's like the heir of like the dukedom. And then she's like, oh my gosh, I actually like this guy. He's very handsome and nice to me and like fun. And it's like, all right, fuck it, let's do this. So she's like, yeah, boy. And so then they head out of there arm in arm. Meanwhile, back at the viewing room, Amy's super embarrassed, and she realizes that like a whole bunch of people are looking at her and Edward. And then she tries to like grab Tigger to like sneak away, but her father and Edward start parlaying about the situation, and then eventually it comes down that they are now officially engaged. She's no longer the fiance candidate, she is now fiance, or not quite fiance, she's going to be fiance. They just have to have like the announcement party or the engagement party or something. Later on, they watch Harold. His team ends up winning the whole tournament, and then later on, so Harold's team wins the whole tournament. Then back at like the Northland, I think it's the Northland Estate, Amy's family, she overhears like Joshua complaining to Isabel that Harold's like, I don't want to go to this like fucking after party and take the prize, you go do it for me. And he's like, what? No, you have to. And he's like, no, I'm gonna go fight magic beasts. And then his dad like grabs him and is gonna like knock him the fuck out. And then Isabel's like, and then he drags him outside to like yell at him some more. And then Isabel's like, I better go check on that, so your dad can get kind of impassioned. So she goes out. Take him out. Yep. Oh, and that leaves Yasmin and Amy like alone for the first time like ever. And then Yasmin's like, hey, I was also isekai'd here. And so we find out that she is not just like the girl that Harold played like video games with back in like the previous world, but that she is literally the same girl who played video games with Harold back in the other world. And then she has like a whole conversation about life in Japan, how she was like sick in bed or injured or something, and that the only way she could experience life was through video games, and that now she's like loving life because even though she's hunting monsters and she feels like she's not that good, she gets to be here. And even being raised in like the grandfather's kingdom with her grandfather, because I guess her parents died or something. was like okay until he died, and then some nobleman, because she's like the daughter of she's like a bastard child of a nobleman. So then she was going to get taken away to do something, and then like she gained her magical powers, and she's like, nope, I'm going to go do this instead. Adios. And like her whole goal in life is to like catch up with Harold. And she loves Amy's family, and like they treat her so well, and she's so happy to be a part of this whole situation. And then Amy's like, oh, so you've been dating my brother? And then she gets like super nervous because again, she's Amy's age, so she's like 14, and she's like, what? No, we're just friends, I guess, for now. And then they have a good chat about everything going forward, and like the plan of action with all that, and how they're just going to go kill beasts, and she's going to work really hard to become better and catch up to Harold and whatnot. A bit later, Edward and Alex are at the post-tournament party hanging out, and then they see Joshua there, and they go to chat with him for a bit because, like, hey, old man, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, my fucking son, that asshole, like, sent me here. He just, like, took the fuck off and all this stuff. And so they chat for a little bit, and at some point, Jalil, like, meanders up, and he's like, hey, whatever, Marquis Northland or something, I want your daughter to go to Bakur with me, which is, like, very far away, and be the healer. And then Edward is like, absolutely not. And the Jill's like, why? You guys aren't engaged. Like, you can't just like deny like the crown prince of the kingdom who's asking for like an alliance situation. It could cause like diplomatic problems or something. And then right as like Edward's about to argue some more, Joshua steps in front of him and says, oh, your Royal Highness, I apologize, but you would have to get permission from Amy, which I'm sure she's going to say no, because she is currently engaged to Edward right now. And so like you're going to be taking away like their princes, like a princess essentially, to go over there. And the Jalil's like, what do you mean? That's not true. And he's like, oh yeah, they just haven't announced it yet. And then Jalil's like, good, and gives like a wink to Edward and meanders out of there. And then Edward is like, did he set this up? Did he do something to like cause this to happen? Like he's very like, what? And then Edward and Amy's dad, Joshua, they talk. And he's like, all right, I still don't want you getting married till she's at least 18 years old. I know, like, whatever fucking thing's going on here, but in Japan, where we're from, he doesn't say it like that, but it's the same situation. Like, they could technically get married when she's 15, I think, in this world, as someone was saying, is, like, the age of marriage, the age of consent. And in my head, I was like, that's also the age of consent in, like, a lot of the world we currently live in right now, in real life. So this 18 thing is kind of funny. I guess in Japan, it's more hardlined, probably. But even, like, America, I think, like, 16 is pretty universal, like, the age of consent to get married. Anyway... something like that. So anyway, and then Joshua tells Edward that Amy wants him to come over and meet with her because she wants to talk to her. Edward gets super excited. A bit later, Joshua comes back home. He's super drunk because he finally like accepted like this engagement thing. Because even though they had the conversation earlier and they came to like some agreements, there was still like Joshua was still like not fully on board. And so with his announcement to Jalil, like the engagement's like officially happening. And so now he decided to get fucking drunk. So he's like, oh, Amy, I gave Edward your message. I'm going to go pass the fuck out. But then she's super excited to get a message. And then at some point, Riddle, the owl, shows up and has like a letter. And she's like, oh, is Edward not going to make it? He only sends letters when it's something. So she like looks at the letter. And right before she's about to open it, Edward does show up. And it's like, the fuck? And they show up with the letter. And it's like, I'm on my way. And it's like, wah, wah, wah. It's like, talk about contrived drama. Like, jeez. And then at that point, they like hug and like chit chat a little bit. This is a very G-rated book, so I don't think they even kiss. Like, the most kissing we ever saw in this was like a peck on the cheek. Anyway, and so then Amy like shows Edward the ring his mother gave to her and asks more about it. And she's like, look at this inscription on the inside. On the inside, it says it's Edward's name, and it has his birth date on it. So this is a really big fucking deal. He's like, this isn't just like to get into like the royal library or whatnot. This ring means you're a member of like the royal household. So like clearly the mom, probably because Isabel and her like chit-chatted about it, decided that she liked Amy and that that queen and king are given like her approval to marry their son and be a part of the royal family, right? That's like what is heavily implied. And then okay, so then we get to the epilogue. So the engagement party, we got Alticia. She gives Amy a hard time for being engaged for so long because they're 14 and they're not going to get married till they're 18, so it's like 4 years of like engagement. Oh, the book says 3 years. I just saw in my notes, so I guess maybe she's 15 now, but it's super long and the whole 18-year thing. Then at some point, Amy has to go back to the party. She was like taking a break, and then Tigger wants to come, and then she's like, oh, and then Edward's like, you can bring Tigger, it's fine. and then she thinks about all her friends and her adaptation to this new world and how great of a time she's going to have. And then they head out to the party, and it's like the end. Not quite the end. There's a couple intermissions. So the first, but that's like the end of the story, right? That's what I mean when I say like the book kind of wraps up. Like, I mean, yes, there's like room for more, and I'm sure if I looked it up, there'd be like 15 more volumes of this story. But like the story of her and like Edward's like love and such is like, it's not completed because they can obviously like have 3 more years of like shenanigans and other things going on and like a marriage and having kids and stuff. Like there's, you can take this, you could just like keep rolling this thing out. But that's one of the reasons I feel like, oh, I'm good. I don't really need to see any further. Like this kind of like wrapped it all up for now. Like I'm sure you could have more, but like I'm good. I don't really care that much about it. Anyway, so to kind of wrap things up after the epilogue and the end of the story, we do a couple intermissions. If you remember all the way back to like the International Cat Day, which is where they took like the painting of Amy dressed like a cat with like Tigger. Apparently, the Duchess paid the painter to like go ahead and like distribute that painting, just make it like far away from like the capital, so none of the prince or the Northlands or anything would like find out about it. But when Edward's out in like one of his inspections, he like finds a copy of it, and it's like the fuck, there's a painting here. That's amazing. And then there's also like a painting. There's like another painting. Oh, no. And then, like, so Edward gets a copy of the painting because, like, why not? And then Amy's, like, visiting him, and then she sees it, and she's like, oh, my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. And then the final side story is about Amy bringing home a kitten that is, like, kind of sick, and then how her and Tigger and her mom and family, like, get and like, her healing magic are able to, like, recover the kitten. It's just, like, a cute little story that ends up the book. So that's, I prefer a cat over a harem, avoiding villainous otome game, something. I know the whole name will be in the title. But yeah, it was decent. If you're like a preteen girl and you're listening to this for some god-awful reason, it's pretty good. Other than that, I don't know if it's a recommend. It's written well, the story's interesting, the characters are fun, the whole story's just like fun. It's like dumb fun, but like there's nothing here if you're like a dude at all, right? So there you go. Go ahead, share, subscribe, share, comment, whatever. Cool. Catch you guys later. Bye.